My name is Detective Pierce. I've walked into crypts that breathe, halls where time itself fractured, and stairwells filled with coffins that never stayed shut. Yet nothing felt quite like the case that led me to the Iron Aviary. It started with a letter. Not the usual police dispatch, not even a frantic telegram, but a neatly folded page written in ink that had bled into the fibers of the paper as though it refused to dry. The message was short and signed, and eerily polite. Detective, the birds will not sleep. Their wings still move, though they are long dead. If someone does not listen soon, they will wake the keeper, and then the cages will not be enough. It came with a crude sketch, a massive wrought iron dome, shaped like a birdcage large enough to house a cathedral. Beneath it were dozens of smaller cages, stacked in spirals like the ribs of some mechanical beast. At the center, a tower. No explanation, no address. And yet I knew the place. Every child who grew up in Greymont had heard of the aviary, a Victorian monstrosity built at the edge of what was once a botanical garden. The story was that Lord Alastair Hemsworth, eccentric even by the standards of the aristocracy, had filled it with rare birds from every continent, creatures of impossible colors and songs that made people weep. But after his sudden death, the aviary was sealed. Some said the birds all perished. Others swore they still sang at night. By the time I arrived, the grounds were overgrown. The wrought iron fence that once protected exotic gardens now sagged with rust, its spikes bent like broken teeth. Weeds choked the cobblestone paths, and a strange silence pressed down over the place. Not the natural hush of an abandoned estate, but something deeper, like the air itself was listening. The aviary loomed ahead, a dome of black iron ribs reaching 30 feet into the sky, its surface crawling with ivy. The gates were chained, though the chain itself was brittle enough to snap with a firm tug. I stepped inside. The air changed immediately. Cold, though it was early summer. My boots crunched against feathers, thousands of them, brittle and gray, littering the floor. They drifted from the rafters like ash. And then I heard it. Not a song, not quite. More like the faint scrape of claws on metal, repeated at uneven intervals. A cage door rattling. Something moving where nothing should be. The aviary smelled of iron, rot, and dust thick enough to choke. Rows of cages lined the interior walls, some large enough to hold wolves, others small as lanterns. They were all empty. Or appeared to be. Shadows clung to them, darker than they should have been, and I caught movement out of the corner of my eye, a flick of wings, a shape darting just out of sight. I stopped at the center, where the great tower rose from the foundation like a spine. Its iron staircase wound upward into the dark. A plaque at its base, corroded but legible, read, "Every wing accounted, every song preserved. Lord Hemsworth." As I read, the first note rang out. A bird call. Sweet, melodic. But wrong. It was not one voice but dozens layered atop one another, harmonies and dissonance intertwined into a single sound that made my skin crawl. It didn't echo naturally, it pressed against me from every direction, as though the cages themselves were singing. I drew my revolver. It felt absurd, pointing a gun at cages and shadows, but instinct won over reason. The sound stopped. Then came the flutter. Above me, something moved in the rafters. I raised my lantern. What I saw was not a bird. Not anymore. Its wings were tattered, feathers falling in clumps, yet it moved as though untouched by decay. Its body was stretched thin, almost skeletal, with a beak that opened too wide, revealing rows of tiny teeth. Its eyes glowed faintly, pale as moonstone. It clung to the bars overhead, staring down with an intelligence that turned my stomach. The letter had been right. The birds had not slept. The creature launched itself downward in a blur of bone and shadow. I fired once, the shot cracking through the dome. The thing shattered, not into blood and flesh, but into a cloud of feathers that swirled around me before dissipating into ash. Silence returned. And then every cage door in the aviary clicked open at once. The sound was deafening, hundreds of latches releasing, swinging open in a chain reaction that echoed like distant applause. I spun, lantern light sweeping across the rows of empty cages, but none of them were empty anymore. Shapes stirred inside. Not birds, not animals, but echoes of them, things shaped from smoke and feather, half-formed, their wings twitching without sound. Some pressed themselves against the bars, their heads twisting unnaturally, beaks scraping metal. Others simply watched, their eyes glowing faintly in the dark. I backed toward the staircase. My gut told me the tower was not safer, only inevitable. From the shadows near the entrance, a voice whispered, "You came. Good. He's been waiting." I froze. The words were faint, as if carried by the rustle of feathers. Male, cracked with age, or perhaps not a voice at all, but something mimicking one. The lantern flickered. One by one, the spectral birds stepped free of their cages. They did not fly. They stalked along the iron floor, claws scraping, wings dragging, their glowing eyes fixed on me. And somewhere above, higher in the tower, another sound joined them. The slow, deliberate turn of a key. The click of the key echoed through the aviary, resonant, deliberate, like the toll of a distant bell. I froze halfway between cages and stairs, listening. The spectral birds pressed closer, wings dragging across the rusted floor, their forms wavering like smoke but moving with undeniable weight. The sound came again, metal on metal, slow, rhythmic, patient. Someone, or something, was unlocking doors far above. I moved for the staircase. It spiraled up along the tower's inner wall, the iron steps slick with condensation. My boots rang hollow against them, each step betraying my presence. The birds followed but did not rush. They climbed after me in silence, as if herded by an unseen command. At the first landing, I paused. A heavy door loomed there, iron-plated, with a viewing slot like those in prison cells. I raised my lantern, but the slot was covered from within. A faint scratching issued from behind it. Not claws, quills, I thought. The sound of something writing. A chill crept over me. I reached for the handle. The door was unlocked. Inside lay a study, dust-caked, but not abandoned. A desk stood at the center, scattered with parchment. The ink was fresh. Whole pages filled with tiny, meticulous script, names. Thousands of them, written line by line, every one marked with a symbol like a feather at its end. I picked one up. The paper was damp, the ink glistening. The last name written there was one I knew too well. Pierce. The rest of the page was blank, as if waiting for something more. Behind me, the birds shifted. Their claws scraped louder now, restless. I shoved the paper back and stepped away from the desk. The walls of the study were lined with cages, small, delicate, gilded. Within them, no creatures stirred. Only bones, tiny and brittle, draped in feathers that had rotted to dust. Their beaks gaped open, frozen mid-song. And yet, faintly, I heard them. Music without sound. A chorus woven from memory, clawing at my thoughts. My lantern dimmed, shadows stretching across the desk. Then the door slammed shut. I spun, revolver drawn. The slot in the door slid open, and a pale eye peered through. Not glowing like the birds, but bloodshot, human. "You shouldn't have come," a voice rasped. "He doesn't forgive." "Who are you?" I demanded. "The keeper," the voice answered. "He counts the wings, tends the cages. You've opened them. Now you're one of his birds." The eye withdrew. The slot slammed shut. I pounded the door, but it wouldn't budge. When I turned back, the desk had changed. The parchment was gone. In its place lay a single ledger, bound in black leather, a feather quill resting atop it. The quill dipped itself into a dry inkwell, then scratched across the page. I watched as new letters appeared in neat strokes, one after the other. Detective Pierce. First flight. The iron steps outside groaned. The birds had reached the landing. Their eyes glowed beneath the door, their shadows stretching across the study walls. The ledger's page turned on its own. The next was blank, save for two faint words at the top, second flight. I slammed the book shut, grabbed the lantern, and looked for another way out. There, a narrow service ladder bolted against the far wall, leading upward through a maintenance hatch. I climbed quickly, every rung biting cold into my palms. The hatch opened into the aviary's upper girders. Here the dome narrowed, the air colder still. Iron beams stretched like the ribs of a dead titan, each strung with chains. And on those chains hung cages, dozens swaying gently, though no breeze stirred. The cages were full. Not with birds. With people. Their forms were gaunt, withered but alive. Men and women in tattered clothes, their eyes wide, mouths stitched shut with coarse thread. They clawed at the cage bars, fingers raw and bloody. Some bore feathers sprouting from their skin, patches along the arms, neck, even their faces. They shook their heads violently, as if begging me to leave. Below, the spectral flock gathered at the landing, waiting, their pale eyes never leaving me. A voice drifted from higher in the tower, smooth and measured, as though reading from scripture. Every song must be kept. Every voice caged, lest it be lost. The birds are memory. The birds are truth. And you, detective, you are already singing. The lantern flickered. The captives in the cages began to hum, though their mouths could not open. A low, vibrating tone that resonated in my chest. The chains rattled. The quill's words returned to me. First flight. Second flight. Whatever the keeper meant, I did not intend to find out. I edged along the beam, searching for another ladder or stair. The cages swayed violently now, as though stirred by a storm. The humming grew louder, rising into a suffocating chorus. And then, from the highest cage at the tower's heart, something stepped forward. A man, or once a man. His robes trailed like feathers, black and iridescent. His head was hooded, his hands tipped with claws that gleamed like polished iron. Where his face should have been, only a beak of bone jutted forward, sharp as a blade. The keeper. He raised his clawed hand, and every cage door above me creaked open. The keeper spread his arms, and the cages above swung open like the petals of a monstrous flower. The captives did not fall. They stepped forward, as if walking on air, their shackled limbs moving with mechanical precision. Threads of shadow, almost invisible, stretched from their backs to the keeper's claws, tugging them like marionettes. I froze on the beam, revolver aimed but useless. What would a bullet do against something that stitched people into cages and turned them into birds? The keeper's voice carried, deep and echoing, as though spoken inside my own skull. Every aviary begins with silence. Then comes the first flight, when the song is born. Tonight, Detective Pierce, you begin your second. The marionettes turned their heads in unison. Their eyes glowed faintly, not with life, but with the same pallor as the spectral birds below. Their mouths remained sewn shut, but the hum that vibrated from their chests grew louder. Chains rattled overhead. The cages banged against one another in violent rhythm, a storm of iron clashing through the aviary's dome. I backed along the beam, searching desperately for escape. A ladder descended from the rafters ahead, leading toward a catwalk that curved around the upper dome. my only chance. But the captives moved to block me, stepping effortlessly across empty air. Their feet didn't falter, didn't slip. They simply obeyed the keeper's invisible strings. The hum rose into a shriek. My vision blurred, the lantern's glow sputtering against it. The aviary itself seemed to shudder, as if its iron bones resonated with the chorus. I raised the revolver and fired. The report was swallowed instantly by the noise. The bullet struck one marionette square in the chest. No blood. The body convulsed once, then steadied. The stitched lips twisted upward in a grotesque parody of a smile. They did not fall. The keeper laughed, or rather, a hollow approximation of laughter, a sound without breath. His claws tightened, and the marionettes lunged. I bolted for the ladder. My boots slipped against the iron, nearly pitching me into the void below. I grabbed the rungs and climbed, lungs burning, every muscle screaming. The shrieking chorus followed, the marionettes advancing across nothingness as though gravity had no claim on them. I reached the catwalk and hauled myself over. It circled the dome in a narrow ring, no wider than a man's shoulders. Beyond it loomed glass windows set into the aviary's frame, warped and thick with frost. A storm raged outside, wind and snow, battering against the glass as though begging to be let in. The keeper pointed upward. The iron chains above rattled, lowering a massive cage from the dome's apex. Unlike the others, this one was empty, its door yawning wide. "For every song, a cage," he intoned. "For every cage, a keeper. Your voice belongs here." The cage swung toward me, guided by unseen force. It crashed against the catwalk, its open maw inches from where I stood. The marionettes closed in. I fired again and again, not aiming anymore, only trying to slow them down. Each shot punched through them with no effect, save to make their heads twitch at grotesque angles. The lantern guttered, my last light failing. I had one choice left: the storm outside. I slammed the butt of the revolver against the frosted glass. Once. Twice. Cracks spiderwebbed across it. The shriek of the captives grew frantic, rising into a scream that felt like it would split my skull. On the third blow, the windows shattered. The storm roared in, snow and sleet lashing against my face, the wind a howling beast that tore at the catwalk. The cage swung wildly, its door clanging against the rail. The marionettes faltered in the gale. The keeper's claws dug into the shadows, straining to hold his strings taut. For the first time, his posture shifted, unsettled. I didn't hesitate. I leapt through the broken window into the storm. For a heartbeat, the world was nothing but icy air and darkness. My body plummeted, spinning, the aviary's iron dome vanishing above into shadow. And then, wings. Not mine. A spectral bird seized me mid-fall, its talons like frozen knives sinking into my shoulders. Another joined, then another, their pale forms surrounding me in a storm of feathers. They bore me not to safety, but sideways, back toward the aviary's base. The wind carried a single word, the keeper's voice threading through the storm. Third flight. I hit the ground hard. Not snow. Not earth. Iron. The impact knocked the breath from my lungs. The lantern shattered beside me, its glass hissing against the frost-rimmed floor. Darkness rushed in, broken only by the pale glow of spectral wings wheeling above. The birds circled once, then dissolved into ash. I was alone. At least I thought I was. Groaning, I dragged myself upright. My revolver was gone, wrenched from my hand during the fall. The cold bit so deep into my bones that it felt less like temperature and more like the absence of life itself. I was in a corridor beneath the aviary. Long, arched, its ribs lined with rows of smaller cages. Some were empty, their bars twisted open. Others held forms that shifted faintly in the dark, too tall for birds, too misshapen for men. Their breaths rasped, shallow and uneven. Chains dripped from the ceiling like vines in a jungle of rust. The air reeked of feathers soaked in brine, of scorched flesh, of something older than decay. Then came the sound. Not footsteps. Not chains. A steady pulse. Mechanical, rhythmic, vibrating through the iron itself. Like a heartbeat. The keeper's aviary had a heart. I moved deeper. My boots scraped against the floor, echoing too loudly in the silence. Cages groaned as their occupants stirred, eyes glinting faintly in the dark. Some pressed themselves against the bars as I passed, their sewn lips writhing as though trying to form words. One reached through the bars, a hand too thin, with joints bent the wrong way. Its nails raked my coat. For a moment I thought I heard its voice inside my head. "Don't sing!" I wrenched free and stumbled onward. The corridor widened into a cavernous chamber. And there it was, the heart. Suspended from chains thicker than tree trunks. A mass of iron machinery churned and beat. Pistons pumped. Gears ground against one another. Black fluid dripped from valves into troughs below, steaming on contact with the cold floor. And through it all, that pulse. It wasn't just sound. It was pressure. Each beat pressed against my chest like an unseen hand, synchronizing my own heart to its rhythm. The keeper stood at its base. His form was taller now, his claws longer, his silhouette bent backward at an impossible angle. His face, or what passed for one, had stretched, the sockets hollow and glowing faintly. Chains ran from his wrists into the machine itself, binding him like an anchor. "You fled," he said, though his mouth never moved. The words hammered into my head, disjointed and cold. But flight always circles back. Here is where the voices are refined. The cages along the walls rattled violently. From them poured pale shapes, crawling, stumbling, dragging themselves toward the heart. Their eyes glowed with the same dim fire, their mouths sewn yet vibrating as though screaming. The keeper spread his claws. The captives fell to their knees before him, their bodies convulsing. The seams of their lips tore open, not blood, but black smoke pouring out. They exhaled in unison, and the smoke twisted upward into the machine. The heart pulsed stronger. The sound split my head. I staggered, palms pressed to my ears, but it didn't help. The pulse wasn't just noise, it was inside me. My breath sank to it. My veins throbbed with it. The keeper's claws tightened on his chains. "You are an untempered voice," he said. "You will be caged. You will be tuned." Something moved behind me. I spun, and out of the shadows lurched one of the marionettes from above. Its head lolled, neck broken from my earlier bullet, but its body moved without hesitation. Others followed, their limbs twisted, their faces still cracked in that mockery of a smile. They advanced, hands reaching. I had no gun. No lantern. Only the storm's frost still clinging to my coat, and the iron all around me. I grabbed one of the loose chains from the ceiling and yanked. It came free with a scream of rust, heavy and jagged. A weapon crude but solid. The marionettes rushed. I swung. The chain connected with a crunch, sending one staggering back, its jaw dangling by a thread of flesh. Another leapt, and I smashed it to the ground. They didn't bleed, didn't cry out, just kept crawling forward, relentless. The keeper's hollow voice boomed. "Every song must learn its refrain." The cages along the chamber burst open, their doors slamming against the walls. More forms spilled out, hundreds, each mouthing soundless cries. The smoke from their bodies thickened, feeding the heart until it thundered like war drums. The floor trembled beneath me. Cracks split the iron, spilling more of that black fluid across my boots. The stink was unbearable, oil mixed with rot. If I stayed here, I would be swallowed whole. I bolted toward the far end of the chamber, chain still in hand. A narrow passage yawned ahead, half hidden behind pipes. The pulse grew weaker there, its rhythm faltering, as though the heart's reach was thinner beyond. Behind me, the keeper's voice roared, shaking every bone in my body. "Flee, detective! But the song will follow." I plunged into the passage, not daring to look back. The passage narrowed until I had to crouch, the iron walls damp and slick with condensation. My breaths echoed in the confined space, mingling with the faint rattle of chains above. Each pulse of the aviary's heart reverberated through the walls, weaker now but still present, like a phantom heartbeat refusing to die. I emerged into another chamber. Smaller, more intimate. Unlike the vast machine hall, this place was lined with iron feathers, hundreds, perhaps thousands, embedded into the walls like scales. Each feather pulsed faintly, glowing with a pale inner fire. They hummed in dissonance, overlapping until it felt like the walls themselves were whispering. At the center stood a single cage. It wasn't large, barely taller than myself. Within it crouched a figure. Not a marionette. Not one of the smoke-bled husks. A man. Or what remained of one. His skin was paper-thin, stretched tight over bone. His lips had been sewn like the others, but crude stitches had torn free, leaving his mouth twisted in a half-grimace. His eyes were sharp, lucid, burning with desperation. When he saw me, he pressed against the bars. His voice came in a rasp that sounded not through the air but straight into my mind. "You are not part of it, yet." I froze. He clawed at the bars, his fingers raw and bloodless. "The keeper feeds. He takes the voices, binds them into the iron. This place sings because it devours. But the song is incomplete." I stepped closer, wary. "Who are you?" His answer was a whisper, broken by coughs. "I was the first." The iron feathers along the walls trembled at his words, their hum shifting to a deeper tone. The air thickened, charged like the moment before lightning. "The first voice he took," the man continued. "But something went wrong. I did not blend. He caged me here to rot. I hear the song always. It will not stop. It will never." He convulsed, collapsing against the bars. Black smoke spilled from his mouth, sucked upward into the feathers above. The glow in his eyes dimmed, then flickered out entirely. The cage was empty. My stomach turned. Whoever he had been, man, prisoner, experiment, he was gone now, consumed like the rest. But his words lingered. The song was incomplete. Before I could move, the feathers on the walls began to fall. One by one, then in cascades, tearing free from the iron and drifting toward the chamber's center. They spun in the air, hundreds of razor-thin shards circling faster and faster until they formed a vortex. The aviary was shedding its skin. The vortex solidified into a towering shape, iron bones, iron wings, a skeletal bird that scraped the ceiling with its talons. Its skull was a cage of twisted bars, and within that cage burned the light of 100 stolen voices. The keeper had shed his mask. His voice thundered not in words but in raw vibration, rattling the marrow in my bones. "Sing with us." The iron bird lunged. I dove aside, the vortex of feathers shredding the floor where I'd stood. Sparks flew. My chain weapon clanged uselessly against its talon, doing nothing but ring out a hollow note that joined the cacophony. The chamber itself began to collapse. Feathers shrieked through the air, embedding themselves in walls and stone. The heartbeat of the machine in the distance surged, matching the keeper's new form, louder and faster. I realized then, The aviary itself was his body. The machine heart, the feathers, the marionettes, all of it was part of him. Killing the monster meant killing the building. And I had nothing but rusted chain in my hand. I scanned the chamber. At the far end, pipes jutted through the walls, spewing steam. Black fluid ran in troughs toward the central cage. The keeper's feeding lines. If I could disrupt them, starve the heart, maybe, just maybe, the song would falter. The keeper lunged again. I dodged, the tip of his wing tearing a gash through my coat. I rolled, grabbed one of the loose pipes, and yanked with everything I had. It tore free, spewing boiling steam. The keeper shrieked. Not in pain, but in dissonance. The feathers wavered midair, their glow flickering. I ripped another, and another. Steam scalded my hands, but I didn't stop. The chamber filled with hissing clouds, choking and blinding. The black fluid reversed in the troughs, splashing violently. The heartbeat faltered. The keeper thrashed, wings striking the walls, feathers scattering like shrapnel. One sliced across my arm, another grazed my cheek, blood mingling with the steam. But the rhythm was breaking. I tore free the last pipe, and the chamber screamed. The heart in the distance convulsed, gears snapping, pistons grinding to a halt. The keeper collapsed, feathers falling like ash. His form unraveled, the light within his skull flickering. He whispered, not thunder this time, but soft, desperate. You will cage yourself. All voices do in time. And then he was gone. The aviary crumbled around me. Iron supports groaned, chains snapped, cages fell like hail. I sprinted through the collapsing corridors, the ground shaking underfoot. Feathers rained, glowing faintly before dissolving to dust. At last I burst through the entrance. Snow. Cold air. The storm had passed. The aviary loomed behind me, its frame sagging inward as though bowing under its own weight. With a final groan, the entire structure folded, collapsing into itself. Silence. Only the wind remained. I stood there, shivering, bloodied, my ears still ringing with echoes of that impossible song. The aviary was gone. The keeper was gone. But the words lingered. You will cage yourself. When I finally turned back toward the faint glow of the town, I knew sleep would never come easy again. Not with that song still pulsing, faint and patient, somewhere deep inside my chest.